Welcome everybody to this finance meeting where we will be dealing with the annual plan. The important part, an important part of us attempting around our table to deal with the issues and service levels that people would like us to deal with and produce an economic plan that people can live with. Not an easy task, but we're going to do our best. And I want to start by thanking everybody, not only who is here taking an interest, but everybody who has submitted to our plan. We have no direct way of knowing what people would like from us in this process unless we hear from you, and we have heard from individuals, collections of people, and we have very thoughtful submissions and really helpful for us for our deliberations. So I can't thank you enough for being part of this process. It just allows us to do our job. How we're going to go about proceedings today is, for those of you who have papers in front of you for today, we've got some service and a set of papers with service and funding requests. Oh, sorry, I should have welcomed you all. I sort of thought I had by thanking you, but welcome to everybody this morning as well. We're going to go through the service and funding. Okay. I'm just reminded that we need to do our meeting procedures first. So, any apologies? I don't think all the councillors are here, so I don't think there's any apologies. No requests for a public forum, although we've of course got a lot of public input to look at. Confirmation of the agenda. I'll confirm this agenda, do we?
Second.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Thank you, Brian. Against, carried. If there's anybody with a conflict of interest, please be reminded that you should step aside from decision making. And the matters for consideration today are the annual plan, deliberations and recommendations. We'll leave these recommendations till the end of proceedings. And moving back into how we're going to conduct today. We have 8 pages which our staff have wonderfully summarised and put together for us in a cohesive fashion of service and funding requests, which we will go through a page at a time. And what I would like from councillors is, if you have any questions, and by questions I mean things that one would usually put a question mark at the end of as a sentence, as we go through these pages, put your hand up or indicate to us. And as we work through it, some of you will have ideas about resolutions you might wish to make. If you have any resolutions that come out of either what's in these service and funding requests or your thoughts having asked questions and had them answered, send them through to Liz. So we are not at the moment doing resolutions where any resolutions you propose can be sent through to Liz and we will collect them. So this is going to be, going through these 8 pages, is going to be question time. We will then work through to the submissions, the 100 or so submissions we have, and we may need to some of those we will have already dealt with. A lot of the issues that have been raised, we will have dealt with. And that doesn't mean we haven't listened to the individual submissions. It's just that they have been partially covered in the levels of service requests that people have had. Then we will deal with any resolutions people have. And at that stage, we can have debate on the topics that people raise as resolutions. So the long and short of that is that questions in the meantime, and if you have something that wants to be discussed in a resolution sense, send a resolution through. Those will be the things we talk about. Right. So the first page of the service and funding request, this is page 9 of people's papers. Have anyone got any questions about that page? No questions? Second page, which has 15, 18 and 19.
Yes, please. The question is, sorry, the question is about Brian Dixon and his comments about the climate change indicators. And I think there's a fair comment in there about them not being particularly measurable. And I'm just wondering if the staff have, it says we can consider how details on the ongoing and planned climate change related work. I do think there's an interesting problem there about our measures. I don't want to hold up the debate today, but I'm just wondering if staff have considered that any further.
Is that for you, Mike?
So as the measures in the draft stand, we don't feel we've got flexibility to change them as they are, but we acknowledge that some further consideration and reporting back to council, perhaps through finance committee reporting, and how we can sort of improve those measures around that particular activity, and reflecting that activity is changing to over time. So, but as the measures stand, staff are holding to that.
Does that finish your question, Councillor Wilson?
Somewhat. Regrettably.
No further questions on page 10, page 11.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Sorry, bus users.
Hold on.
It was same page, sorry.
Scott. Are you
Yeah.
still on that page?
Yeah, the bus users support. Bus go as opposed to the planned $1.1 million reduction in the transport budget. If somebody could just remind me what that $1.1 million reduction is all about.
Mr. Rosler?
I can answer that one. What they're referring to there is in the overall transport spend. It shows our transport spend dropping 1.1 million. I think they've assumed that means that we're decreasing the service and the spend that we're doing. It's actually not because of that. Our public transport spend has stayed the same as what it was in the LTP. So we're still budgeting the same. The reason for the change and what it looks like it's dropping is that we've actually done in it the way that we treat super gold in the model. We've changed it and we've now netted it off revenue when we had it showing gross. So we've now adjusted it. Previously we had an extra basically $1 million in the cost, but we had $1 million in grant revenue, and we've now netted those two off so that it aligns with how the actual costs come through our actual financials when we do our normal annual report and reporting. So there isn't actually, although they've referenced that, and it is mentioned by another group, it might be by the union, I think might have mentioned it as well. But they've just assumed that means we're decreasing our level of service and our spend, but we're not. It's just an accounting treatment change.
Oh, thank you.
Kevin, then Kate, then Alexa. Kevin.
Yeah, just on the bus users group, sorry, I've just got to fix it. So there's a comment there on the reclassification of super gold. Could you explain what that is? The difference is the reclassification of super gold in manager's comments. Is that what you've just said to us? Is that?
Yeah, that's what I just explained. It's just an accounting treatment. As I said, we've been grossing up the cost and the revenue. The reality is when it comes through in our actuals, we always end up with a variance in both because it gets netted. So we've now just changed the budget model to reflect how it comes through in our actual reporting.
Excellent. And if I may, Chair, just going through to the next one, Business South, and this is probably a general question on all submissions, is we've made comments there. How do we relay our comments and where we get to at the end of the day back to our submitters?
Very fine question. Mr. Rosler.
Yep. So all the submitters are responded to via letter at the conclusion of the adoption of the annual plan. So that's July. By about the third week of July, end of July, all submitters have received a communication from council thanking them for their participation and outlining the decisions that have been made. And that occurs post every annual plan and LTP process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, just a question that I'm thinking about bus users, and they've talked about a range of operational improvement suggestions were provided. And we're not, I mean, you've got a bus users group already, which we don't get to hear or participate in as councillors to ensure and understand what changes are made. And I'm wondering whether we need to lift our game on that, or whether it's possible in the same way that we've looked at liaison groups in the past, whether we can formalise that bus users group in a way where the councillors hear the feedback as well, and how often that group meets and whether that would be doable.
Is it?
That's a question for...
Yeah, Mr. Donnelly, since you're the senior officer, as it were, do you want me to go to you for comment, or to start with Mr. Rosler in the room in general?
I think for most of these, if you're sort of through to Mike, and if it's not something that he'd answer, then we'd go to a GM. I think in this particular case, what we're talking about is, whether or not we're involved with this bus user group and how we're interacting with them. I think that's not exactly an annual plan topic, but it's probably something that just the PT ops team who do deal with this group and other bus users, on a day-to-day basis, they could probably comment. So I can't actually see on the screen whether Gavin's there, but if Gavin was there, he might have a comment. But I'll just see that sort of thing. It's not going to impact what we put in the annual plan, but it's just a matter of how the ops team will work with these various groups as they do currently through the annual plan year, as they do in this current year and have done previously.
Dr. Palmer.
Yes, Madam Chair, Mr. Donnelly's correct. It's not a group of this council, but it's one of a number of stakeholder groups that we interact with in the course of delivering our transport operations.
I think Councillor Wilson's question was, could we participate in that group and how often does it meet or what groups there are? Was that where you were going, Councillor Wilson?
Indeed.
This question, is Councillor Wilson seeking to be invited onto this external group? Is that what?
No, I'm seeking to have councillor representatives on those to ensure that those matters which are being raised through annual plan can be efficiently and effectively dealt with. And I'll be asking this of Guardians of the Lake, because we had that discussion with Don Robinson the other day, that we can ensure that these issues that come to annual plan do go through and are acted upon in a way or that we can understand if they're not. And I think, annual plan is more than just finances. It should be. This is, and a lot of these things that irk people is they don't want to put money into them unless they're getting a better service or a service out of them. So I think in that basis, there are other ways of treating them that don't have to be in the financial reports. So if the question is, can councillors attend, and it won't be me, and can we formalise those bus user groups to possibly with terms of reference so that we can actually ensure that the feedback is and how we do that. Thank you.
On the second point, it's not our group, so it's not our place to write terms of reference for this other group. In respect of the first link, we can take it up with them as to whether they would. We can follow up as to whether they would like councillors to be a part of the interaction they're having with this council.
Okay.
I'm wondering then whether that's moved from being a question to, if you'd like a resolution, Councillor Wilson, and it might come through to a different group rather than a resolution for today.
That's
today to go through to a.
Yeah, so that's absolutely fine. Can I just be clear? I am not asking to be part of the bus users support group. I had thought that we had a bus users group that talked to staff, and if we don't, I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. I thought I'd heard reference to that in the past. There are two things here, but yeah, I'm happy to come up with that motion. I'll send that through to Liz shortly.
Okay. Councillor Forbes.
I was just following.
Sorry, did you, Mr. Roseler, want to still comment? Or
oh, look, I was just going to make a process comment. From a pure perspective, and this is just me talking from the guy that manages the annual plan process, theoretically, we're supposed to just stick to what people have asked for and stick within, what's actually asked within a submission. So in that particular instance, and I might have this way wrong, but I'm not clear that anyone was asking for support groups or anything. In that instance, yes, they're making a specific comment about clarifying a part of our plan because it was important to them, and that's been answered. And I think we just move on. But no disrespect to where Councillor Wilson's coming from.
When things are raised at these hearings, the suggestion, the most useful way of dealing with them is for, if people want to talk to these or move forward with them at all, issues that are raised from these discussions, that they go through to a different committee for a TEP. But I think it is within our remit to suggest that things go, to make resolutions to go off to somewhere else to actually deal with things that are raised.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So,
yep.
Councillor Forbes.
Mine is simply that I'm asking a question around the explanation that you gave, Nick, for what looks like $1.1 million reduction. Do you get to talk to the bus user support group about that? Do you include that in your feedback to them when you write to them?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So they'll get a full explanation.
They'll get a full explanation, yes.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right. If we're done with page 10, page 11. Any questions for page 11? No. Right. Page 12. Our hands. Page 13.
Now we'll just
I'm working on the basis that you have read your papers, Councillor Scott, so
Then that's the correct basis, Madam Chair.
Excellent.
Nevertheless, one still has to read what one's written and etc.
Has what one's written involved itself with a question about page 12 or 13?
Well, I'm just catching up with you. I don't think so, Madam Chair.
Right. Page 14.
Dunedin City Council.
Page 15. And page 16.
I'm sorry, I'm going a bit backwards if possible.
All right, feel free because we'll keep moving, and if people have a thought, we'll go backwards for a brief instant. A question from you, Councillor Wilson.
So the off-road cycleways that the DCC raised, and I appreciate that Dr. Palmer has advised both council and the bylaws hearing committee recently on the that they're going to do some work on that. I'm just checking with Dr. Palmer that isn't going to require any more money, because I don't want to hear about that after the event. So as far as scoping that work, does the work he intends to do, will that open up that opportunity in this annual plan, or are we going to need some more funds?
Madam Chair, the work that's underway is development of a policy on access to our flood banks. That's well advanced, and we're looking to bring it back to the relevant committee soon for endorsement. But it's not a strategy or anything beyond a simple policy. If council was to get into developing a strategy or funding other organisations or modifying flood banks, then there would definitely be a resourcing requirement in terms of staff numbers and dollars, and those aren't provided for in the annual plan.
Thank you.
Right. Page 15. And page 16. Councillor Malcolm.
My apologies. I'm just working off one screen. I'm just having difficulty at your extreme pace, which is very efficient.
You have
sorry,
a positive yet, Councillor Malcolm?
No comment for the press. Look, sorry, just going back to submission 34, and this is whoever is New Zealand Tramways Union. We've got a manager's recommendation. I just wonder, it's about that process. No change in the draft annual plan, and notes the requests for a policy decision for ORC to become an accredited living wage council. Who follows that up, and what is that process and approximate? Yeah, what's the process from here?
Who wants to have a crack about that?
Yeah, no, I'd have to defer that to a GM, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would think that would be Gavin to answer that one about the work that's going on in the living wage space.
So, Madam Chair, this annual plan and long-term plan provides for a living wage paid to bus drivers contracted to council in each year of that plan at the September 2021 level. It doesn't go beyond it to September 22, September 23 numbers, because those are not yet known. Those will be future decisions of council. My reading of the submission, though, is a broader issue about all council activity and living wage policy, not limited to bus drivers. But I might have that wrong.
Councillor Deaker. Oh, have you finished your question?
No, probably. Yeah, look, I agree with Dr. Palmer that it is the broader question, but I just wonder when does that question get brought to us, or how do we? And we've had a request from tramways. So when do we get that opportunity to discuss that in council?
I think that's a political question, Councillor Deeker. I don't think it's one that you would expect our staff to bring to us, apart from when we raise it about buses or whatever. If we raise the question of whether we want to become an accredited living wage provider, or however it's termed, then I think it's for us to raise that, and then
Perfect. That's okay.
I would expect though that the relevance to the annual plan process would be that if we want to have our staff do some work in what that would cost us, and it would cost us money, it would both cost us money to have a look and see what it would cost us and the money it would cost us in the end. So that if what we're doing would be making a resolution to ask our people to look into it, then that would have a cost, I would guess.
Look, does council want to entertain this request for this? And it's a policy decision.
Yeah.
It's not part of the annual plan per se. Right now, it's do you want to entertain the policy?
Unless we want to have a
in the future?
resolution saying
So
that
yes or no.
we want to spend money to look into it.
And if it's yes, you want to entertain it, then there'll be some advice coming through, and that would be the process for a subcommittee.
I think
Are we able to talk to this particular matter?
no, you're not able to talk to it. At the moment, you can ask questions
Ask questions.
if it is a question, but Mr. Donnelly wants to speak first. You want to ask the question of, you will be after Councillor Deeker.
On this matter.
I actually
On
think,
this matter or any matters.
I think Councillor Deeker did have his hand up first, but I'll just quickly say, Dr. Palmer's quite right that although this has come through from the Tramways Union and public transport does have provision for the current living wage in our budgets. The submission here is the wider council becoming an accredited living wage council. So that, as you pointed out, Councillor Calvert, that becomes a policy matter that we'd have to consider. So it's not something that we could determine today, but it is something that if council wants to, that through the upcoming months and as we work through next year, we can look into that. But it has implications wider than just internally for council. Obviously, we pay more than living wage to our direct staff, but becoming an accredited living wage council has implications for us having to understand what all of our contracted staff and suppliers are doing as well. As Dr. Palmer pointed out, there's work going on in that space already in the public transport arena, but we haven't looked into that around other services that are provided to council, and it will take us quite a bit of work just to bring something back to you, and so that council can consider its position on that.
Councillor Deeker.
Yeah, thanks, Hilary. I'm on page 16, submission 71. And I'm asking a question of Mike, I think, about our proposed response there, which seems pretty vacuous to me. The intent is for council to consider funding a business case in the next LTP period. Now, that's presumably over the next 10 years. Is that really what we mean to say back to protect our winters? I would have thought annual plan period would be the maximum that we would be contemplating. Am I right or wrong?
Well, it's referring to our transport plans, which have a longer time period than 1 year, obviously. So, and regarding the detail of that plan,
the recommendation here is saying that the costs of funding a business case would be incorporated into the next LTP. So you could choose to have it in year one of that next LTP cycle. The point is that this requires business case development, and a business case has to be funded. And a business case is a prerequisite to NZTA considering whether they would co-fund any services.
Yeah, I get all that process, that's fine. My question is really, I suppose the point is, when do we propose to do this business case along with Waka Katahi?
Were you saying, Dr. Palmer, that that would be during the lead up to the next LTP in that lead up process, or am I not hearing you right there?
What I'm saying is in the lead up to the next LTP process, you would be considering, or council would be considering whether it wishes to prepare a business case, how much that would cost, and then would incorporate that business case work into the LTP.
In 3 years' time.
Right, so that's
year and a half.
That's the position, and so if you'd like to make a resolution that, or suggest a resolution that brings that further forward, Councillor Deaker, feel free.
Yeah, I do feel free, thank you.
Right. I think Councillor Scott has something he would like to ask.
Yeah, it goes back to the previous.
Yes, I realise that. We just.
So if I got that right, then in terms of the living wage is based on, we put the living wage all the way through an LTP based on an assumption that there's no inflation. That's the first question.
I can answer that one. No, what Dr. Palmer's saying is the current budget assumes living wage at the current 2021 level. Yeah, that's how we've budgeted our numbers. But all our numbers are then increased for inflation. So we have factored in inflation. What Dr. Palmer's saying is we haven't gone and estimated what we believe the exact living wage number would be for 2022, 23, 24, because of course those numbers are yet to be determined. But we've used the current number, and yes, it is inflated over inflation adjusted over subsequent years in the LTP.
Cool. And we'll let her ask a subsequent question. Number 74.
Certainly can.
We're on page 16. Yeah, so the QLDC, or the Queensland Lakes Climate Reference Group, has asked for various things, and actually these are very similar to what we're actually providing. And my question is previously, putting ticks in all these boxes meant a rate increase of 18%. And then if we reduce that, as some were contemplating, down to 8% or 10%, was this one of the actions that would drop out? That's my question.
Just for clarification, which submission are you on?
74, it's the climate change where we engage a principal advisor climate change, and we work with TAs and iwi partners doing various things. I mean, are we already committed to that, or is that something that potentially would drop out if we didn't go for an 18% rate increase?
No, I think, Amanda, are you going to answer that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So in terms of trying to have that position in place for year 2 of the LTP, that person has already been recruited and is working underway. And it also lines up with our RPS commitments. If we weren't to have someone in that role, there would be challenges in meeting the commitments that were set out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So we're already committed. It's not in any action list to drop if we did decrease our proposed rate increase. Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Right, page 17. No, and
I'm not sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who the question's for, but 83 Southern Lakes Sanctuary. If we were of a mind to support that Southern Lakes Sanctuary proposal, what would be the key issues that we would be focusing on, accepting that if it aligns with predator-free Dunedin, of which we provide a grant to them, would that be the sort of consideration we'd be giving, or would there be other aspects, i.e. staff resource or whatever? So sorry, I'm not sure who the question's for. Maybe Gavin. Don't know. Sorry, I don't know.
Yes, Madam Chair, there will be questions of staff resourcing, but I think the bigger question is where does it sit in terms of priorities and why this project and why now? Those will be your considerations and how it fits with objectives and is the best investment. Those kind of things I think would be relevant.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Councillor Scott.
Cool. So just carrying on that question that Councillor Noon did, like, where do we actually have that discussion? Because, like, for example, we've got a big focus and support on the Halo group around Dunedin, and I think that, personally think that's fantastic. And now this other proposal around Queensland has previously been raised. So where do we have that conversation where we strategically support these concepts around the region? Because until we have that conversation, when are we going to have that conversation and look at it regionally and strategically? I'm unsure, for example, how long we will continue to support Halo. When do we look at that strategy?
We have been looking at it, Councillor Scott, and I don't think that's something our staff can answer. They produce a variety of workshops and papers to us where we can discuss strategy and what we're going to do, and we can bring things up to discuss things. It's not a question that I think it's fair to expect our staff to answer.
Well, yeah, with respect, Madam Chair, I wasn't actually asking you. I was actually asking one of the GMs, but because they have actually submitted, and I'm just unsure whether we should be putting a hand up to support them. And I'm wanting some reassurance that if we don't support them in this instance, that it won't be just sort of lost and we'll talk about it again in another 2 years' time.
Would our Chief Executive like to comment on the question, when are we going to talk about these things?
Yeah.
Thank you. Look, you know, my view on this is that these sort of proposals, typically they turn up here in an annual plan or LTP process. Realistically, you know, these discussions and these groups should be working with our staff, you know, prior to this process. And in this particular case, you know, this is part of our environmental implementation activity. And, you know, that group has been going through, or that team's been going through quite a process of, you know, of development in their strategy around that. They have been reporting through to the implementation committee. The view on how these groups all fit into our activity program in that area, and then what groups we may or may not fund. And you remember we've had papers come through from that area around, that's where the Eco Fund comes through. We've had the, you know, the additional funding into that same process for the Maintain the Gains. That's where the work with predator-free Dunedin sits. So there should be an overall you know, strategy and report coming through from that area, and that's where these should be considered, because it's very difficult to, at this point, just you know, without considering everything going on that we're involved in, to make a decision whether to, you know, fund a particular group. And really, I think, you know, the process needs to sort of be flipped back to where these discussions are happening well in advance of the annual plan and LTP decisions, so that it's actually the decisions are made prior, you know, in the appropriate committee or area that looks after that. And then ultimately those decisions feed into the annual plan. So what you would see is an annual plan that would already have funding for the groups that council has already strategically decided it's going to, work with and fund at certain levels.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. A couple of points. I think from you.
No, not a couple of points. Have you any further questions?
I want clarification on the question that I've asked, Madam Chair, and I've had a response, and I'm not satisfied with the response. The Eco Fund is at a certain financial level. The Southern Lake Sanctuary was well and truly at another level over and above that. And to reply that, I mean, they over the last number of annual plans have been submitting. They actually have done a lot of donkey work. So my question is, it's all very well us turning up annual plan and saying, oh, well, there hasn't been discussion. Well, there has been. It's various points. So what is the next step? Is it now, as you said, in terms of the annual plan process, or do we go from here to look at that overarching strategy? Mr. CE.
Yeah, that's basically what I was saying, is that I don't think based on where we're at, I don't think it would be, appropriate, particularly given that there'll be a significant funding impact, to make a decision on this. And you haven't got the information in front of you from staff to do that. But the thing would be, what you're saying is you'd like to see something come back to you. And I think, as Councillor Calvert said, this meeting here can refer things that to other committees. And in this case, you'd say you'd like to have an overview of these groups and have that strategic discussion, so that you'll be able to work out what work you want done, who you want to, if you want this group to us to do more work with them, and then hopefully that happens through the next 12 months, and this time next year we're not in the same position of having the same discussion, because they're saying we'd like some funding.
Cool. Should I move the motion now?
Well done, Nick.
No, if you've got a motion, send it through to Liz. We're collecting any motions that people have together later. This is question time.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Hope.
I just want to say thank you, Interim CEO Donnelly. That actually clarifies probably quite a lot for the rest of us.
It wasn't a question, Councillor Hope.
No, it's not a question, but the statement actually is quite pertinent to this, Chair Calvert, because it kind of sets the mood for the tone of the day. And I appreciate what you asked, Councillor Scott, as to how we feed. So just want to say thanks.
Cool.
Right, page 18, which is the last of those pages of service and funding requests. No further questions on those. Right, we'll move through to, and we will have discussed, when I say discussed, I mean clarified for ourselves by asking questions and by preparing any resolutions, I'm sure that anybody wishes. Some of the things that have been raised by the consultation feedback and the submitters. So,
sorry, Hilary.
Councillor Wilson.
So just taking the question earlier about Southern Land, the Wakatipu Pest Group, and the yellow-eyed penguin, which is the last submission on the page, and I'm sorry you went through that, I was a bit slow. In there, the council staff will follow up regarding plans for engagement and biodiversity hui and our broader plans for this structure. Is that again, and I think that is exactly where we should be doing that sort of stuff and having a discussion in a bigger picture. But I'm not sure if that means that we need to put funds in for that in this financial year or not. And I just want to check if that's,
If that's their comment on the proposed annual plan that we have in front of us.
Yes, that's a comment. So the question is, in order for us to participate, does that require us to have some money? It's the last 198, and it will set a context for all those community groups in a better way of what they should be looking at for us for the next. Yeah, there's a question, I think, to Gavin.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't quite catch the front end of the question.
The question was that last yellow-eyed penguin one, for example, it said we'll follow up and do things, and which I think Councillor Wilson was supportive of, but was saying, is that what we propose to do within the proposed annual plan that's in front of us? That doesn't require us to do anything additional on top of what is in this plan. Is that your question?
Indeed. Thank you.
The hui are provided for in the plan, and of course we'll have a fuller update for implementation committee next week and the environmental implementation quarterly update as well, where we can get into those a bit deeper.
Right, that takes us to the end of the service and funding level request questions. We'll now move on to the consultation feedback, which is where we have a summary of the submissions we have received. And I'll follow through that page at a time as well, but I will mention what's on, who are the people on each page as we move through, in acknowledgement that we have these submissions. So on this first page, we have ACE. Trying to read, it's too small, the writing. See, yeah, no, it's just that I'm not diligent, I'm on hard copy, so.
Oh, no, when are you going through so quickly?
Sorry. Oh, I've got it now. Yeah, first. Okay, so on this first page, we've got A. Smith, Alison Cree, Alison Maynard, Alan Henry, Amir Levi. My apologies if I pronounce any of these incorrectly. Andrea Johnston, Andrew Bush, Andrew Harvey, and Andrew Miller. And we have a question from Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And again, this is probably more a process question where on item 8, submission 8 from Mr. Andrew Harvey is around our pest management operational plan and a request for a formal review. I assume that we either send you a motion today or follow up with the director or department that handles that to see what that response will be.
Dr. Palmer?
When you say operational plan, can you just clarify, please, what type of plan is being referred to?
Yeah, Dr. Palmer, yeah, it's the pest management operational plan that he's looking for a review on and has various questions about. Probably no immediate effect on annual plan or nothing to financially. It's more he is under the annual plan process. He's wanting us to look at that service that we're providing. So I'm just bringing it to everyone's attention now that is the centre of his submission, but we will need some comment back to him and some action from that. I assume there may not be any action, but he certainly will require explanation. But I'm just saying, do I need to put a motion to that, or will it simply be contacting the director in charge of that area?
If it's not needing further funding apart from what is in the plan, I think maybe what the next step would be, Councillor Malcolm, is a resolution asking whether our current review processes and continuous improvement, which we're operating under, can report back to us about how things are going in that plan without a further funding request, but that's a
through
Mr. Rosler.
through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Malcolm's question, I can coordinate a response through them.
Thank you.
And I'll liaise with staff with that.
If I could just add, Madam Chair, that the operational plan that sets out how we give effect to the peace management plan is reviewed annually, and the operational plan for 22-23 will come to council very shortly, along with a review of how we've delivered current operational plan, the one for the current financial year.
So perhaps that can be enhanced in a response to that submission out.
Yes.
So just explaining further that so as that
yes,
he can understand that.
Thank you,
Excellent.
gentlemen.
Right, the next page has, and I apologise in advance for this, Andrew Powazinski, Arrowtown Promotion and Business Association, and Arrowtown Village Association, Barbara Hoare and Billy Marsh. Any questions on those submissions? No, part of the reason why I think we've not necessarily got a lot of questions on some of these is because they've been so carefully crafted and crafted by the submitters and described by our staff so that we understand what's being asked of us. So thank you for the submitters and to our staff for that. Next page. Brian Dixon, Brian of Ranfurly, Brian Keane, and the Bus Users Support Group. I think we've probably canvassed those. Councillor Wilson.
Well, I've just sent an email to Nick. I'm not quite sure who this one needs to go to, but if we were to follow up with Brian Dixon, because obviously we can't do it this year from the advice from Mr. Rosler, could we consider that the council seek internal advice for consideration of better measures for climate change action for the 23-24 AP? The problem is I'm not quite sure which committee that goes under. Which committee would that be sent to if we were reminded to do that?
Through Madam Chair, I obviously wasn't clear with my answer before. That's exactly what staff will be doing. So we'll be rolling into the next planning process, dare I say it, for year 3. And we'll be bringing, and that will be one focus for improvement around our measures, amongst others, which we'll report through to Finance Committee.
Thank you. Right. No further questions on that one. The next page has the Bus Users Support Group, Aotepote's Te Rupi, Toko, Kiaki, Pahiki, Aotepote, Busco, and Business South, Cullen Brash, Central Otago Dark Sky Society Incorporated, Central Otago Wild and Conifer Control Incorporated, Coastal Community Cycle Connection, and Colin Withnell. Well, sorry, Colin Weatherall. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Look, so this comment, maybe I've got it wrong. General comments, and this is where my comment about liaison groups goes. User representation on ORCPT planning meetings. Again, am I correct in believing that should go to as an implementation if we wanted to set up a group that they could be talking to staff directly with councillors?
Feel free, it seems appropriate.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that page? Right. Next page. Colin Skur, Damien McNamara, David George Maynard, Clifford, Department of Conservation and Disabled Persons Assembly New Zealand. Oh, sorry, and Dr. Barry J. Wills. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry. Colin Skurs, at the moment, I just want to know the understanding on the likelihood of us to be able to do any of the capital works for the he's got immediate pause of the long-term program results. It's the use of consultants for the Tyree and flood and drainage schemes. So I'm just checking how committed, but also how far down that review process we are.
Was that a Dr. Palmer question?
I presume so.
Through you, Madam Chair, an amount of our capital program on the Tyree is committed through contracts with central government, shovel ready. And so that work is committed. We covered that in the workshop you had, and we explained that.
Yeah.
There are a number of other things that are of a minor nature and could potentially be slowed down, but eventually they have to be done. And ultimately it comes down to how much risk you want to carry in terms of scheme performance and then having to gear up again. We're not working on anything at the moment that the review might say should not be done.
Sorry.
Or done differently.
Sorry, my question, I obviously didn't give it to you clearly enough, Dr. Palmer. The question was about the review itself. We're obviously committed to consultants, I presume, for the whole review. And how far along are we in that review against timetables?
Through Madam Chair. So at the moment, the consultants working on the Tyree are focusing on the risk assessment piece, which is at the front end of it. As with any contract like that, we could vary the contract and not move to the back end of it. But there are many things that are hanging on this review being completed in a timely way, including the next long-term plan and rating reviews and other things.
Sorry, how are we going against our long-term plan timetable for that review?
There have been some delays and we're looking to accelerate and catch up on that, but we are behind program.
It isn't funding that's affecting that, Dr. Palmer.
No, as with many things, the pandemic setting has not been good in terms of getting external sources, resources to do things, and there have been some other factors, but we are working to accelerate it.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm.
There is a theme going through, and this is a question, but I'm just going to highlight the names. So you've got Colin Skur, Elm Grove Limited, submission 35, I&D Bryant, Simon Parks and Springwater Ag, who are basically asking the same question. So is it appropriate that we, the group that is charged at the moment with looking at a review of those schemes, sit and have a chat with Dr. Palmer just to give that update more specifically?
Just repeat the question, the issue again, and the question, please.
Well, the issue that we've just had, the question from Councillor Wilson regarding timeframes and where everything is at in the reviews and the works on the Tyree, would it be appropriate that the group already deemed to be looking at a review of the Tyree talk with Dr. Palmer to just have greater clarity around those timeframes to relay back to submitter 25, 35, 48, 82 and 84, which are all in the same, basically asking the same questions?
Madam Chair, we're happy to provide the detailed program to all of those submitters with an update on exactly where we're at in terms of milestones for delivery.
Magic. Thanks very much, Dr. Palmer.
You might want to, Dr. Palmer, forward what you send to them or how you do that through to us too, so as we're updated as well.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you. Moving to page, sorry,
Sorry,
not your turn yet, Councillor
no, that's
Wilson.
cool.
Mr. Noon, Councillor Noon, Chair Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's a question for Anita, and it relates to submission number 30, Disabled Persons Assembly New Zealand. They talk about air quality and the cuts to the monitoring program. I wasn't aware that there have been any cuts or any planned cuts. I think that's business as usual in terms of monitoring, education and compliance. Well, I made that wrong.
So, excuse me, through you, Chair, I'm not aware of any cuts. In fact, we've started additional monitoring of PM 2.5 in 5 locations around Otago, in addition to the PM 10 monitoring that we're already doing. So there's no change in level of service for air quality monitoring.
Based on that answer, Michael picked that up.
Well, I just, yeah, they've got the wrong end of the stick there. I suspect they put the word monitoring in and they were actually took that out, just their air quality program.
Yeah, strategy.
Yeah. So I think it's just a mix up on their point.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Right, Councillor Wilson, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I did. I just want to pick up on Dr. Barry Will's comment about, and I think this is possibly a timing issue, about just not being seen out in the field and councillors, and it's also a COVID issue. But the question is for, I think, Gavin, with the FMU and the catchment liaison officers that we've got, would you expect that staff generally will be seen, and it's probably a Richard question as well, actually, that they'll be seen out in the field more, given a green or an orange COVID context better, given the catchment work that we're doing and also the educational work?
Well, the answer to the question is they actually are at the moment. Our staff do spend an extensive amount of time in the field. So that's how they operate. That is their jobs, right across biosecurity, catchment advisors, engineering field staff and others. So that happens already. There has been a slight impact with COVID, but that's just how we operate. They are predominantly field-based landowner engagement staff. And we have a number of engagement things underway at the moment that they're participating in.
Perhaps I should have, with the catchment group, the integrated catchment group work, would you expect that to increase and being seen out in the field then? I'm just trying to answer his question, and I think we've got a good news story to tell, that we should be saying that actually we're going to have more staff, and we've employed staff recently to be out in the field and welcome to engage. I'm actually trying to turn that round as a good bit, or have I got that wrong?
No, that is, you are correct, Councillor Wilson. We can give the details of numbers of people. So we have been increasing, in accordance with council decisions, numbers of people in catchment advisory area and also biosecurity. And this annual plan increases the numbers further. So we can give the details around that, including where we're based, roughly coastal or central.
I think, I mean, Dr. Barry Wills has been very involved in a lot of projects, and I'm surprised that he's, if he hasn't seen that change already.
Moving on to page 24, which has the Dunedin City Council, Dunedin Tracks Network Trust, Dunedin Tramways Union and Elm Grove Limited. No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to DCC's reference to, sorry, I've now lost the submission, off-road trails, it's a question, is it worth putting in the reply, Mike, the reference that Gavin made before about the policy, looking at the use of flood banks, etc., so that we're developing a policy to enable those connections to occur where possible. We're putting that in.
Absolutely, and that's what they're getting later. I can flick any of those letters via you guys as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. No, I was concurring with Councillor Lee.
Talk fabulous.
Sorry.
Councillor Wilson.
On that count, in developing the policy, I think it would be very helpful to be having some of these people in the room before we publish the policy or even start discussing the policy. And is Dr. Palmer considering that so that they can actually consider the areas in developing the policy, that they consider the areas that may be most in demand for the sort of trails? Or is he going to develop the policy without that without that consultation?
We don't intend consulting on the policy. So,
would he mind if we got those people in the room to have a discussion before the policy is developed, in order to make sure that we're focusing on the most likely issues that are going to come before us in implementing that policy?
I don't mind engaging with those stakeholders, but we need to be really clear here. We're talking about flood bank structures that are there dealing with important public safety, property protection issues, and there's a whole bunch of other stakeholders who might have a very different view about whether they want those risks compromised for the sake of trails on flood banks.
Maybe we need to
I'm sure that that's part of that discussion, but I'm glad that you're amenable to that, and I might do a motion along with that. Thank you.
Right, next page 25. Federated Farmers New Zealand, Forest and Bird Dunedin // Otipoti, Francis Anderson, Friends of Lake Hay Society, and Gavin Dan. Right, moving to page 26. What I'm proposing to do once we've gone through these questions is have an adjournment to allow people to get their resolutions and thoughts in order, and we will look and see whether some of the resolutions are not requiring funding, and some of them it are, so some of them might be sending something off to other committees or whatever else we want. And so as we can collect together the financial resolutions and look at it both individually and then as to in and around whether that means that we change the proposed rate rise. So, but we will have an adjournment for people to collect their thoughts and other things together. So page 26, Genevieve Robinson, George and Sandra Page, Glenn B, Growing Solutions for the Vincent Plan, and Hika Sabula, and I haven't probably got that right at all. Any questions? Right, page 27, Jim Ledgerwood. Oh. Sorry, Councillor Scott.
Oh, thank you. 41, Genevieve Robinson. I think she's talking about the Oamaru Harbour there, yeah, and we say that there's an implication for on our LTP. And I think she's saying funding should be allocated with urgency around the harbour, and she's identified issues. So that's the Oamaru Harbour. Who should I be directing the question to? That's the Oamaru Harbour. If we're of a mind, what would be the next step to seek further information around that? Is that our responsibility, the Oamaru Harbour? Yeah, just some discussion around that.
I think that's two questions, is it, Councillor Scott? The first is it our responsibility, and the second is
Yeah, that could do for a start, yeah.
what funding might we
Yeah.
being asked for? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just trying to,
What should we do is not an appropriate question
yeah,
now,
no,
but
I get
what
that one.
funding they might be asking for
Yeah.
does seem to be an appropriate question that somebody might care to answer.
Mike, just before we get, was this one, this person, they're from Dunedin, was this referencing Oamaru Harbour or Dunedin Harbour?
I'm not clear, to be honest. Yeah.
And although, because my take is, although it mentions the harbour, it's talking about talking about dolphins and bird life. Yeah, and it's not obviously it's saying we should be acting in that area. I mean, we haven't got any specific activity that we're involved in, protecting any of those particular bird life or dolphins, other than within our planning and regulatory framework, we're looking to protect the harbour environment as we are the rest of the environment. So I would sort of look at this and I'd go, what they're sort of asking us to do would be move into an area that council doesn't operate in currently, and we don't have any policy or plans to do so.
Yeah. I mean, if it's the Dunedin Harbour, we've got our environmental responsibilities, but also we are actually, one of the actions is to get a harbour plan, and maybe it dovetails in there with Dunedin. If it's Oamaru Harbour, how much of a responsibility do we have there with the Oamaru Harbour, the Otago Regional Council? So that's, as Madam Chair said, in terms of seawall and harbour restoration. Whose responsibility is that?
Through you, Chair, I might maybe provide some assistance. So ORC has jurisdiction under the coastal plan for some of that area, and then the Waitaki district, if it's Oamaru, will have the rest. So our coastal plan at the moment manages structures within the CMA, and we have also, irrespective of whether it's Dunedin or Oamaru, we started our coastal monitoring program, and there's a coastal plan review coming up. So it's not necessarily as immediate as this bit is looking for, but we do have some jurisdiction over some of that space.
Yeah, I know, but that's actually not that helpful. That's not that helpful.
Perhaps our staff can get back to us with having established which harbour we're talking about and where our responsibilities lie and what we're currently doing.
Yeah.
Page 27, Jim Ledgerwood, John Arnold, Honorary Secretary, Otago Yacht Club, John Hamer, Joshua Rendell, Julian Zacco, Nievas, Julie Park, Karen O'Donoghue. Right. Page 28. Fanny Dustin, Leslie Fallowfield, Loretta Bush, Maggie McCormick, Malk Hodge, and Marcus Simons. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, sorry, it just takes a wee while to get this. Going back to the Otago Yacht Club, are staff aware of the issues that have been brought to our attention there, the siltation of the harbour from the Leith and the inability of the Coast Guard to get in and out at low tides? And is there a work program or investigations being done?
I can answer part of that. So Steve's aware of, as far as navigational safety goes, the dredging is not the responsibility of ORC. We don't hold the consents for that activity. That's held by the Yacht Club in some cases where it relates to their marina, and then Port Otago have some dredging consents as well, and they work with the Yacht Club in terms of that program. So yes, we are aware of that issue that's raised in the issue with the Coast Guard, but it's not an ORC function other than for Steve to be across any navigational safety issues that might arise.
Thanks, Richard.
I guess the question sort of might be one partially for Port Otago, and so it may be that we might want to ask them what's happening at the moment, or for them to just give us a brief, something just responding to that, which isn't part of our process here, but I think that it may be, since we're quite good friends at Port Otago, that we might like to just ask them for
my suggestion, councillors, that the yacht club will be fully aware, better than we are, of what Port Otago's dredging program is, because they work very closely together on any activity in and around that boat harbour area.
Okay, moving on to um, 28. I've just, has that got? Okay, Leslie Fallowfield, Loretta Bush, Maggie McCormick, Mel Hodge, who I thought yours, so I head over the page, Marcus Simons, Matthew Soul, Mrs. J.M. Marshall, Murray Bond, Otago Helicopter Trust, and the Otago Peninsula Community Board. Any queries about those submissions? Page 29, Percy Allen Jackson, Protect Our Winters, New Zealand, PSA, Ptolemy James Mortimer Webster, QLDC Climate Reference Group, Queenstown Lakes District Council, Rachel Lang and Richard Bowman. Okay, page 30, Sergey Ryazanov, Simon Flatty, Simon Parks Riverside Run Limited, Southern Lakes Sanctuary, Springwater Ag Limited, Sue Maturin, Tyree Trails Trust, Kira Colin Brown, and Terry Wilson. Councillor Malcolm.
Just taking you back one page to submission 74 by the Queensland Lakes Climate Reference Group. One, on all this work around climate change, biodiversity and the likes, they have asked a question about gap analysis, and I'm just wondering where we are actually at, and have we done the gap analysis of information currently available or being collected by others before we start our own programs?
That's a good point.
I'd like to have a crack at that answer. Come on, the staff doesn't all need to look down at their no?
Yeah, is that in relation to, is it specifically in relation to the climate change, or is this just are you referencing, Councillor Malcolm, sort of gap analysis in general? I'm trying to work out, is this a climate change question, or is it a biodiversity question? Because they're sort of touching on both, and they're different activities. So we have obviously we've now got our new principal climate change advisor who would be heavily involved in the climate change space. Also, we've got science and monitoring working in the climate change space, and then in biosecurity, that's obviously in the environmental implementation space. So, it actually straddles across all of it. All of those areas are looking at their work program, and obviously looking at, I'm not too sure what this group is referencing by gap analysis and what they're wanting us to have a look at. That's something we're constantly looking at, is what gaps do we have in our program, and whether whether first off we need to address those, and if we do, then those discussions come back through the various committees.
Yeah, but I think what they're also, it is a broad question, but I think what they're also saying, are we actually looking to see what information is available from the likes of QLDC, Waitaki District, what information that is available already. DCC, I hear now, going to increase their water monitoring. So are we ensuring that we're not actually duplicating, and if someone else is already doing that work to the right standard, do we consider that? So that's probably what I see the question as. So that's why I'm asking the questions: do we do that gap analysis and take into consideration that the monitoring, the work that is actually being done by other entities, and are we sharing that as opposed to duplicating it?
Right. So that's probably more a question for Anita around our environmental monitoring program, and so if the question is, where are we monitoring versus where are these other groups, whether it's this reference group or it's QLDC or DCC, that's our monitoring program and network. I think that's probably something for Anita to comment on, how we assess that and ensure that there's not gaps in the network, or that we're not doubling up on not down in that detail. Whether Anita is enough to comment on that at this point, or whether that's something that needs to be looked at and brought back to maybe the Data and Information Committee. I don't know, but I'll throw to you, Anita.
Yeah, and I can provide you a high level answer and can come back if necessary. So the monitoring team monitors for a range of different council functions. So, for example, a new monitoring station went up on the top of the old main range, I think, for natural hazards and climate change reason recently. And we do work quite closely with the other organisations, so the TAs, to make sure that we're capturing the right stuff for the right reason, and to make sure we're not duplicating. But we can come back to you with some more detail around that if you want to the Data and Information Committee.
Thank you.
Right, you're done, Councillor Malcolm. Take your hand down. Thank you. So as I know when you put it up again. We looked at 30 and Councillor Hope.
Thanks. Could I just go back to page 29, and you've got a gentleman there called Russell Kevin Delling on 79 from Dalclutha. I was just wondering through the chair, Councillor Calvert, could it be a timely reminder or a letter to those on that lower scheme on the Lower Clutha flood? What's happening, as Dr. Palmer points out, there's lots happening, but COVID also is a pausing, isn't it, Dr. Palmer, where a lot of things are happening, but people don't know that at the moment. I went to the Federated Farmers meeting, and 4 things that 4 different people come and ask me. And I just think if we do it for the Tyree flood, is there any reason why we couldn't update those residents down on the Clutha scheme? Please.
Dr. Palmer, that seems to be partially a question relating to what turns out to be slightly vexed idea of the 1-pager, 3-pager, what we're actually doing with these schemes, because if we had that, we'd be able to tell people what we were doing and what was currently underway. Is that something that will be captured when these short summaries of what we're doing are happening?
Not sure I read the submission, excuse me, the same way. I think it's an individual submitter saying some things about different things. If you actually read what they're saying, we're happy to go back to this individual and explain what we're doing about the scheme, but we do engage with landowners on the scheme. We have staff in the field and communications programs. You were there, Councillor Hope, the most recent one. So, we do engage with people. It just sounds like this individual submitter is asking some questions, and we're happy to go back to them.
Just think it'd be good for, well, I think it'd just be good for all of us, as you say, Dr. Palmer, COVID's become, and there's been absentees because there's no, matters beyond our control. And I just think an update. We're doing good work down there. We went down there, we were at the Rosebank Lodge, we went through all the things that were happening, and that's fantastic. Sometimes people just need reminders. That's cool.
So I think that perhaps Dr. Palmer's taken that on board, that we have both a submitter and a councillor thinking that this possibly a understanding or information get out there in the community. And I see you nodding, and I suspect that means you're going to deal to that in an appropriate fashion. Is that a fair?
Yes, it is. We'll reflect on whether we're doing enough in the community around, especially the post, as coming at COVID, what we're doing on the ground in our work program. We'll reflect on whether we're doing enough around that communication.
So Wilson.
Thank you. Look, when you're calling out the names, and I don't want to revisit every page, you seem to be missing a couple, and I'm just wondering if your pages reflect the same that we've got on the internet. So I don't think you called out Russell Kevin Dowling, and in the last page that you called out, you missed out, I think, Fish and Game, Timothy Catterall and Tom Campbell, when you read them out. And I'm only saying that to make sure that those people who may be listening in do know that we've seen their names.
My apologies for that. We've got them on our lists, but for me to make it big enough to read, I lose sometimes the bottom of the page. So thank you, Councillor Wilson, for reminding me to check.
Sorry,
the bottom of the page more thoroughly, which I might notice sometimes.
Yeah, just scroll it up. Yeah.
Could I please just make a comment? And it comes out of the Terry Wilson one on page 30. It's a question and a comment. It's
yes to the question, no to the comment.
Sorry. So Terry, I don't know if staff have known, has sent us a copy of our rates increase over the last few years. He did that overnight. I don't know, and anxious about our rates increase. And we have collectively at times considered that we came from such a low bar that it is only an appropriate increase to ensure that we can do all that we are required to do. And we've compared ourselves in that process to other councils. The question I have is when it relates to things like rabbit control, and we've got submissions for, that Councillor Hope just acknowledged with the Russell Dowling, and it's a wise response, and there's quite a few in there talking about we need to take that on board ourselves. The question is, comparing ourselves to other councils, how much do we actually do as a compare to monitor, so that we can have a really good reflection on how far back we are or ahead on other councils and their rates. So I know, for example, Taranaki does predator free. They run that program themselves. We pay someone else to do that, and they and contribute to their pest control work. As far as rabbits go, are there any other councils doing that in-house?
I can't comment specifically on the rabbit question, but just in general, if you remember, I did, it would go back, it would have been pre-LTP, I looked at doing some comparison of what councils were doing across, across the varying activities. What you get in LTPs and annual plans is at a fairly high level. So down underneath that, while we can talk about what we do, at a sub-activity level and down to a lower level, I can't necessarily see that easily through going through other councils. So it is one of the things when you do compare all the councils, and we predominantly only look at the other regional councils, because it's very, very hard to tell what what Unitary is doing in the same space that we're in. But yeah, all of our work programs are different, and it is one of those things that while we do look at where we sit rate-wise, and we've provided those comparisons with rates across the other regional councils, our work programs are all different, and all of us have different things going on. The answer or whether the question of whether what other councils are doing in, if you like, directly in the pest space, whether or not Dr. Palmer and his team would have more insight over that, I don't know. It is something we could look at, and as I said, looked at it and provided some information previously, but it is very time consuming to go analysing what other councils are doing, and you do find that you can't really get down to the level of detail that makes it worthwhile to compare to what our program is. You can do it at a very high level of, you can look at public transport, and it's easy to see how much we spend on PT versus what, say, Taranaki does and that sort of stuff, and that's easy to get your head around. But down in the space of monitoring programs and environmental implementation, it's very difficult to get down into being able to compare various councils' work programs. And either the detail's not really there, or it's just you're never comparing apples with apples.
Thank you. If I've got a subsequent question, if I may, Solgamore, I presume the regional councils have a regional sector staff grouping that we could ask some questions of. So, and just in a high level thing. So I know that Greater Wellington, for example, is heavily involved in doing track and regional parks. Auckland does regional parks. We don't do any of that. It's not included in our rates, but yet we compare them when we want to justify where we are with rates. So I'm wondering if we can do a high level, and would require a workshop possibly, to ask those other regional councils so that we can give a better idea of where the comparison should sit. If people were, I don't know if other councillors are interested in that at all, but we are being challenged to do some of these things. And if other councils are, then I think it's helpful if we know that they are or are not.
I don't think it's really a question.
Okay.
Councillor Wilson. Clearly we can. If it's a question of can we, of course we can. If it's a question of whether we're going to, that's a political question, and feel free to go down the track of a resolution about it.
Apologies.
Page 31. Tom Clark, Unions, Otago, Vaughan, Malkin, Wayne, Borland, Burland, Whakatapu Wild and Conifer Control Group Incorporated, Woodleaf and Wise Response Society Incorporated, Yellow-Eyed Penguin Trust. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just the response, now that we've got Francesco Hernandez working with us, the comment in there from Wise Response, shift from adaptation to mitigation of GHG, and I think that's mitigation of climate change generally as well. Can I just check, will the terms for his work to be looking at the lowest hanging fruit as far as climate change mitigation or adaptation goes, or is the work program set just at adaptation?
It's an A or B question. Who's going to answer it?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So he's currently building what his work program looks like, so we can come back to you and confirm, how that's looking once he's had more time to do that.
Councillor Beaker.
Thanks, Hilary. I was intrigued by the Wise Response suggestion that we integrate rabbit control with integrated catchment management initiatives. My question about that is probably to Anita. How sound an idea is that? It would concern me that bunging rabbits into the ICM initiative would probably distract from the importance of integrated catchment management, it would be a clumsy marriage, I suspect. Or is there merit in that suggestion? This is an idea we should think about. And I guess Anita and Gavin are the people who can answer that. Is there merit in that idea or not?
So through you, Chair, in an ideal world, council integrated catchment management would take a holistic capture everything approach. So, you'd be managing air quality, pests, biodiversity, land and water, all of those things together. So it's not quite as necessarily as clumsy as it may seem. I'm not quite sure our first round of ICM plans will be there yet, but it would be something that we're moving towards too. So there's one set of controls and one plan and one set of management tools for each catchment or freshwater management unit.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I think your phrase "in an ideal world" is the important part here.
It's actually essential that they.
Councillor Robertson.
Hi, thank you. The yellow-eyed penguin one on bringing together biodiversity groups for a hui regionally. I was wondering whether we are bringing together agencies. We were doing that, but I haven't heard for a while whether that's ongoing in a hui type setting, I don't know, regularly, many times each year, to update where we're getting on biodiversity matters in our strategy. So yeah, I'm wondering whether that's still happening at the agency level, but this submission I know is on a community level initiative. What's happening in that space?
Yes, there was a biodiversity forum in April, and we can talk more about it in future hui at the environmental implementation quarterly update implementation committee next week. We've got a whole section.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that.
We've got a whole section on biodiversity, so we can give you a fuller briefing on that.
Right, I think we're now at the end of our question time. I propose adjourning this meeting for maybe 30 minutes to allow people to go and formulate their resolutions and talk to each other to see if they can provide some coherence in their thoughts, which are likely to receive other people's support or whatever they need to do with themselves. Before we do that, Councillor Wilson, you have a last question? Or?
It's a question of you. If you're going to have the opportunity of talking for us on Zoom, I'm happy to stay online or at least have some coffee to chats with anyone in that room. It does put us at a disadvantage if we're not in the coffee room with you in that half hour.
Absolutely. I'm wondering whether can we go offline. So we'll leave the link to each other open,
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Wilson, and stop recording and adjourn the meeting. Right?
Happy to second.
Yep. Right? All those in favour of an adjournment till 11:10? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you.